I used to think loving Mia made me lucky. For 3 years, I built my life around her dreams while slowly forgetting my own. Every morning, I woke up before sunrise, drove through traffic, and spent 10 exhausting hours at my marketing job. Every paycheck disappeared into rent, dinners, beauty products, camera equipment, and expensive weekends she said would help her brand. I never complained, at least not out loud. One night, Carter leaned against my kitchen counter while watching Mia record another video in the living room. "Bro," he muttered quietly, "does she ever ask how you're doing?" I laughed it off. "That's just how things are right now." Carter shook his head. "No, that's how you allow things to be." I ignored him because I loved her, or maybe because I needed to believe sacrificing myself meant something. 2 weeks later came Mia's birthday party. She insisted we celebrate at a luxury rooftop bar downtown. The place was crowded with influencers, photographers, loud music, and people pretending to enjoy each other. Neon lights flashed across expensive drinks, while cameras recorded every second for social media. Mia looked incredible that night. Silver dress, red lipstick, perfect smile. But when she grabbed my hand, something felt distant, almost forced. "You okay?" I asked quietly while we waited near the bar. She smiled without really looking at me. "Relax. Tonight's supposed to be fun." Then Vanessa appeared beside her holding 2 drinks. "Oh my God," Vanessa laughed. "Mia could literally pull any guy in this place if she wanted." I expected Mia to roll her eyes. Instead, she smirked. Maybe I should test that. I laughed automatically. Very funny. But neither of them laughed back. Mia leaned closer to me. "Relax," she whispered. "It's harmless fun." "What does that even mean?" "It means don't be dramatic." Before I could answer, she walked away toward the far side of the rooftop. Alone, I watched her approach a tall guy wearing a dark jacket near the bar railing. He smiled immediately when she touched his arm. My stomach tightened. Carter stepped beside me. "Tell me she's joking." "I don't know," I admitted quietly. The stranger leaned closer to Mia while they talked. She laughed louder than I had heard in months. Then I heard him ask, "So your boyfriend lets you do this?" Mia rolled her eyes. "He's too safe," she said casually. "Too predictable." Everything inside me went still. Carter looked at me carefully. "Ethan," I couldn't answer. I just stared at her, at the woman I spent 3 years supporting, 3 years protecting, 3 years loving. And somehow, I suddenly looked like a stranger standing outside her life. Carter grabbed my shoulder gently. "Let's go." I nodded slowly. I didn't confront her, didn't yell, didn't beg. I just left. Outside, cold rain covered the empty streets while I sat inside my car gripping the steering wheel. My chest hurt in a way I couldn't explain. Not anger, humiliation. My phone rang. Lily. I almost ignored it, but something told me not to. "Hey," she said immediately. "Why you sound weird?" I stayed silent for a second. Then I admitted quietly, "I think I wasted 3 years loving someone who doesn't respect me." Her voice softened instantly. "What happened?" I looked through the windshield at the rain. She wanted attention from other men more than she wanted loyalty from me. Lily cursed on her breath. "Ethan, you deserve better than that." I laughed bitterly. Maybe Carter was right. What did he say? That I give too much. She paused. He's not wrong. I leaned back against the seat. I don't even recognize myself anymore. Lily stayed quiet for a moment before saying softly, "Then maybe this is the moment you finally start choosing yourself." That sentence stayed with me all night. The next morning, Mia walked into the kitchen wearing my hoodie like nothing happened. "You disappeared last night," she said casually. I poured coffee without looking at her. "Yeah." She frowned slightly. "That's it. What do you want me to say?" "That you were upset." I nodded. "I was." She crossed her arms. "It was a joke." "No," I replied calmly. "It wasn't." Her expression hardened slightly. "So now you're going to act insecure?" I looked at her finally. "No," I said quietly. "I'm just tired." That answer surprised her. Normally, I apologized first. Normally, I chased the conversation. Normally, I tried fixing things immediately. But this time, I simply grabbed my keys. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Work." "You're seriously leaving like this?" I shrugged lightly. "You said it was harmless, remember?" She stared at me while I walked toward the door. And for the first time in years, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. Not guilt, not sadness, fear, because something had changed between us overnight. I felt it too. The distance, the silence, the beginning of an ending. Later that evening, Carter met me outside my office. "You look different," he said immediately. "Ow, calmer." I thought about that for a second. Then I answered honestly. "I think something finally broke." Carter nodded slowly. "Good." I frowned. "Good. Yeah," he replied. "Because sometimes people only wake up after their heart gets shattered." I looked down at my phone. No messages from Mia. No apology. Nothing real. And right there, standing outside my office while traffic moved through the dark city behind us, I made a quiet decision. One final test. One final chance to see who she truly was before I walked away forever. A week after Mia's birthday party, I still felt numb. Not dramatic. Not angry. Just empty in a way that made everything quieter around me. I stopped texting her during work. Stopped asking about her videos. Stopped pretending her behavior didn't bother me. And she noticed. "You've been weird lately," she said one morning while scrolling through her phone. I grabbed my coffee. "Maybe I'm tired." "Tired of what?" I looked at her for a second. "You really want the honest answer?" She frowned immediately. "Why are you talking like that?" I didn't answer. Because I already knew something she didn't. People only panic when the attention disappears. 3 nights later, Carter showed up outside my office. "You're coming with me tonight," he announced. I shook my head. "Not happening." "Yes, it is," he argued. "You've been miserable all week." "I'm fine." "You look dead inside." "That dramatic?" "Actually, yes." I laughed despite myself. Carter pointed toward his car. "One night. Clear your head. Where are we even going?" He smirked. "Trust me." 20 minutes later, we arrived at the rooftop bar. The same one. I stopped walking immediately. "You've got to be kidding me." Carter looked at me calmly. "No, she doesn't get to ruin your favorite places." I almost turned around. Then I saw Mia near the far side of the rooftop laughing beside Vanessa and a group of influencers. My chest tightened instantly. Carter noticed. "You can leave," he said quietly. "But if you do, she still controls the room." That sentence annoyed me enough to stay. I adjusted my black coat and glasses before following him inside. The lighting was dim enough that nobody paid much attention at first. Music echoed across the rooftop while city lights reflected off the glass walls around us. Carter ordered drinks and leaned closer. "She hasn't recognized you yet." I glanced toward Mia. She was already staring. Carter grinned. "Oh, this is going to be interesting." I rolled my eyes. "You enjoy chaos too much." "Tonight," he said. "Absolutely." About an hour later, I sat alone near the side railing while Carter talked to someone across the bar. That's when Mia approached me. "Mind if I sit here?" she asked smoothly. I nearly laughed at the insanity of the moment. Instead, I nodded once. "Go ahead." She smiled while sitting beside me. "You looked familiar from across the room." "That's so." "Yeah," she replied. "You've got that mysterious energy." I stared at my drink so she wouldn't see my expression. For months, she barely looked at me at home. Now suddenly I was interesting because she thought I was someone else. "You here alone?" she asked. "Not exactly." She tilted her head slightly. "Girlfriend?" "Something like that." Mia smirked. "Complicated?" "You could say that." Vanessa watched us from nearby while pretending not to. I already knew she loved drama too much to ignore this. Mia leaned closer. "I like complicated people." "That sounds dangerous." "Maybe boring people are worse." That one almost made me laugh again. Instead, I asked carefully, "So what about your boyfriend?" She shrugged casually while sipping her drink. "Relationships get boring." Those 4 words hit harder than I expected. Not because they surprised me, because she said them so easily. Like our entire relationship was just temporary entertainment. I stayed quiet. Mia kept talking. "You ever feel trapped by someone who's too safe?" I looked at her calmly. "Safe isn't always bad." "Maybe," she said, "but predictable gets exhausting." Every sentence felt sharper than the last. Across the rooftop, Carter stared at me with disbelief written all over his face. Vanessa secretly lifted her phone slightly. Recording. Of course she was. Mia touched my hand lightly. "Honestly," she whispered, "I think I deserve someone more ambitious." That was the moment everything inside me settled. No anger. No heartbreak. Just clarity. I slowly removed my glasses. Mia smiled at first. Then her expression froze completely. The color drained from her face. Ethan. Vanessa lowered her phone immediately. Across the rooftop, Carter nearly choked, trying not to laugh. Mia stared at me like she stopped breathing. How long? She whispered. How long have you been sitting here? I looked directly into her eyes. Long enough. Silence swallowed the table. For once, Mia had nothing clever to say. No excuse. No performance. Just panic. She stood up too quickly. Wait, Ethan, I can explain. Can you? I interrupted quietly. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. People nearby started noticing the tension. Vanessa disappeared almost instantly. Coward. I stood up slowly and grabbed my coat. Mia followed immediately. Please don't leave. I looked at her for a second. Funny, I said calmly. That's exactly what I spent 3 years trying to stop you from doing emotionally. Her eyes filled instantly. It wasn't what it looked like. I laughed softly this time. Not because it was funny, because it was sad. You were flirting with your own boyfriend because you thought he looked more exciting as a stranger. She shook her head desperately. Ethan, please. I walked past her toward the elevator. She chased after me into the cold night outside the rooftop entrance. Rain hit the sidewalk lightly while traffic moved below us. Talk to me, she cried. I finally turned toward her, and for the first time in years, I saw fear instead of confidence in her eyes. I don't recognize the person you've become anymore, I said quietly. Her expression shattered completely. But this time, I didn't stay to comfort her. I was finishing paperwork when my phone vibrated again. Mia, third call in 20 minutes. I stared at the screen for a second before turning it face down on my desk. Carter leaned against the office doorway and crossed his arms. Still calling? Every day. You gonna answer eventually? I sighed and rubbed my eyes. I don't even know what's left to say. Carter walked inside and dropped a coffee beside me. Then maybe that's your answer already. I looked through the office window. Rain tapped softly against the glass outside. 3 months ago, that sound would have reminded me of the night everything broke between us. Now it just sounded peaceful. She showed up at my apartment again last night. I admitted. Carter frowned. Seriously? Yeah. What did she say? I leaned back slowly, mostly crying, apologizing, saying she misses me. And I felt tired more than angry. Carter nodded quietly. That means you're healing. Maybe he was right, because the truth was simple. I still remembered loving Mia, but I no longer missed the version of myself who begged for her attention. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Please talk to me. I locked the screen without replying. A few minutes later, Olivia walked into the office, carrying design folders against her chest. She smiled when she saw me. You're still here, trying to finish this presentation. She placed the folders down beside me. You've been staring at the same page for 10 minutes. I laughed quietly. That obvious? A little. Carter smirked. He's emotionally damaged. Shut up, I muttered. Olivia smiled softly before looking at me again. Rough day. I hesitated, then nodded. She keeps contacting me. Mia. Yeah. Olivia stayed silent for a moment before pulling a chair beside mine. Do you want her back? The question hit harder than I expected. I opened my mouth, then stopped, because I honestly didn't know how to explain it. I miss who I thought she was, I admitted quietly. But I don't think that person ever really existed. Olivia's expression softened. That's a painful realization. Yeah. Carter stretched his arms dramatically. Okay, this conversation is getting too emotional for me. I'm leaving. I laughed as he walked out. The office became quieter after that. Olivia looked down at my untouched coffee. You know something? What? You always talk about how Mia changed. But maybe you changed too. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? You stopped accepting less than you deserve. Her words stayed in my head long after she returned to her desk. That evening, I left work late and headed toward the parking garage underground. My footsteps echoed softly through the concrete space. Then I saw her. Mia stood beside my car, wearing a long beige coat. Her makeup was messy like she'd been crying again. When she noticed me, she straightened quickly. Ethan. I stopped walking. For a second, neither of us spoke. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically. Emotionally. You shouldn't be here, I said calmly. I didn't know where else to go. I unlocked my car remotely, but didn't move closer. Mia swallowed nervously. Can we please talk? We already did. No, she whispered. You talked. I listened. That's different. I stayed quiet. Rainwater dripped somewhere nearby in the garage. I know I hurt you, she continued. I know I became selfish and stupid and obsessed with attention. I looked away briefly. You humiliated me, Mia. Tears filled her eyes instantly. I know. You made me feel like I wasn't enough. That's not true. But you said it anyway. She flinched at my words. For the first time since our breakup, I saw genuine shame on her face instead of defensiveness. I hated myself after that night, she whispered. I crossed my arms slowly. Then why did you keep acting like I was the problem online? Her face fell completely. I was angry, she admitted, and embarrassed. Everyone kept attacking me, so you blamed me instead. I know. Her voice cracked. I know. I stared at her quietly. Months ago, this conversation would have destroyed me emotionally. Now it just felt sad. Mia stepped closer carefully. I miss you. I didn't answer. I miss our apartment, she continued softly. I miss eating dinner with you while you complained about work. I miss how safe everything felt. I finally looked directly at her again. You didn't miss those things when you had them. That sentence broke her instantly. She covered her mouth and started crying harder. I was stupid, she whispered through tears. I kept chasing excitement and attention because I thought stability was boring. I remembered Carter warning me years ago. You're giving too much. Back then I ignored him because I thought love meant endless sacrifice. Now I understood something different. Real love should never make someone feel small. Mia, I said quietly, do you know what hurt the most? She shook her head slowly. It wasn't the flirting. Her breathing trembled. It was hearing you talk about me like I was something temporary. Like I was just useful until something better appeared. She started crying harder. I didn't mean it, but you believed it. Silence filled the garage again. Finally she whispered, is there really no chance left for us? I looked at her for a long moment. Then I answered honestly. I forgave you already. Hope flashed across her face. But then I continued. That doesn't mean I could trust you again. Her expression collapsed. I opened my car door slowly. Mia grabbed my sleeve lightly before I could get inside. Please, she whispered. Tell me what to do. I gently pulled my arm away. You need to learn how to live without needing someone to carry you emotionally. She stared at me silently. And I need to keep moving forward. Tears rolled down her face again. So, this is really over? I looked at her one last time. Then I nodded. Yes. For a second, she looked completely shattered. Not angry. Not defensive. Just broken by the truth. I got in my car and closed the door quietly. As I drove away, I saw her standing alone under the cold garage lights through my mirror. And for the first time since loving her, I didn't feel abandoned anymore. Months passed quietly after my final conversation with Mia. Not perfect months, but peaceful ones. For the first time in years, I woke up without emotional pressure sitting on my chest. I focused on work, stopped checking old memories, and slowly built routines that actually made me happy again. Adrian noticed the change immediately. One afternoon, he called me into his office overlooking downtown. You handled the Harper campaign better than anyone expected, he said while reviewing paperwork. Clients specifically requested you for the next project. I sat across from him, surprised. Seriously? He smirked. You finally stopped doubting yourself. That sentence stayed with me longer than I expected. 3 months later, Adrian officially promoted me to senior creative manager. Carter nearly tackled me in the office hallway after hearing the news. I told you your life would improve without chaos, he shouted dramatically. I laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. You also told me pineapple belongs on pizza, so your opinions are questionable. That's unrelated. Olivia smiled quietly while watching us argue. Things with her had become natural over time. Easy. She never demanded attention. Never played games. Never made me feel like I needed to earn basic respect. Some nights we stayed late at work talking about random things while music played softly from someone's office speaker. And somehow, silence around her never felt uncomfortable. One evening, she looked at me while organizing design files. You smile more now. I leaned against her desk. That obvious? A little. I studied her face for a second before asking quietly, was I really that miserable before? Olivia hesitated carefully. You looked exhausted all the time, like you were carrying a relationship by yourself. I looked down briefly, because she was right. I had spent years trying to convince someone to value me naturally, and that kind of love always becomes exhausting eventually. A week later, our company hosted a formal celebration event after securing several major contracts. The ballroom inside the luxury hotel glowed with golden lights while soft music echoed across the polished floors. Employees laughed near the open bar. Investors moved between conversations confidently. For once, I didn't feel out of place in rooms like this anymore. Carter adjusted his tie dramatically beside me. You clean up surprisingly well. You say that every time I wear a suit. Because every time I'm shocked. I shook my head laughing. Then Olivia walked toward us wearing a dark emerald dress that immediately stole my attention. Carter looked between us and grinned. Okay, I'm leaving before this becomes emotionally awkward. Get lost, I muttered. Olivia smiled softly after he disappeared into the crowd. You nervous tonight? Not really. That's new. I looked around the ballroom slowly. Months ago, crowded rooms used to remind me of rooftop parties and humiliation and watching someone I loved flirt with strangers for attention. Now it just felt like another evening. Another step forward. Then I saw her. Mia stood near the ballroom entrance wearing a black dress with silver earrings I remembered buying years ago. My chest tightened slightly. Not from love, just memory. She looked beautiful, but tired. The confidence she once carried so proudly had faded almost completely. When her eyes landed on me, standing beside Olivia, I watched heartbreak spread across her face instantly. Olivia noticed my expression change slightly. That's her. I nodded once. You okay? Yeah, and surprisingly, I meant it. Throughout the event, I caught Mia staring several times from across the ballroom. She barely spoke to anyone. Vanessa stood beside her for part of the night, but even she looked uncomfortable. At one point, Carter leaned closer beside me. She looks miserable. I exhaled quietly. I didn't want that, but you expected it. Maybe I did, because eventually people run out of distractions and have to face themselves honestly. About an hour later, I stepped outside onto the hotel balcony for air. Cold wind moved through the city night while lights stretched endlessly below. Then I heard heels behind me softly. I already knew who it was. Mia stopped beside the balcony railing without speaking immediately. For a few seconds, silence stayed between us. Then she whispered, "You look happy." I kept my eyes on the skyline. I'm peaceful. That's worse. I looked at her slowly. Tears already filled her eyes. I still love you, she whispered shakily. The wind moved between us again. I answered honestly. Maybe you love the version of me who always stayed no matter how badly you treated him. She flinched hard at my words. I know I hurt you. Yes. I was insecure and selfish and stupid. I nodded slightly. You were. Tears rolled down her face instantly. I think about that rooftop every single day, she admitted quietly. I think about seeing your face after what I said. I stayed silent, because some memories don't need repeating. Mia looked down at her shaking hands. I thought attention meant value. I thought exciting people were automatically better. And now I know stability is rare. I watched her carefully. For the first time since everything collapsed between us, she sounded completely honest. Not manipulative, not defensive, just broken by her own choices. You know what the worst part is? She whispered. What? You stopped loving me so calmly. I looked away briefly. No, I said softly. I stopped hurting loudly. That sentence completely shattered her composure. She covered her mouth while crying quietly. I was stupid, she whispered again. Yes, I replied gently. But not because you flirted with another guy. Because you only valued me after you thought someone else wanted me. Her face crumbled instantly. Because she knew it was true. After a long silence, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small silver key. The apartment key, she whispered. I kept thinking maybe one day you'd come back. I stared at it quietly. Then I slowly closed her fingers around it again. Some doors shouldn't reopen. She broke down completely after hearing that. Not dramatically, just quietly, like someone finally accepting reality. A few minutes later, she wiped her eyes and stepped backward slowly. I really did love you, she whispered. I nodded once. I know. Then she turned and walked away alone into the glowing city night. I watched her disappear beyond the ballroom doors before exhaling slowly. Olivia stepped onto the balcony beside me moments later. You okay? I looked at her, then at the peaceful city lights stretching endlessly ahead. And for the first time in years, my answer felt completely true. Yeah, I said quietly. I finally am.